Doug Blevins' YouTube channel is unique. Not because it hasn't been updated in 6 years. There are plenty of old, neglected channels on YouTube. Nor is Doug Blevins' channel unique for the videos, which all pretty much look the same. 78 thumbnails of football fields, facing the goalpost, with high school and college youngsters frozen just before the kick. No, the Doug Blevins YouTube channel is unique because, despite being an NFL Hall of Fame nominee, he has only 50 subscribers. An NFL Hall of Fame nominee with 50 subscribers. Doug's videos, which showcase up-and-coming kickers, average only a few hundred views, many of which were posted after his Hall of Fame nomination, after news outlets like USA Today and Washington Post had already reported on Doug. You might think all that attention would draw viewers to Doug's YouTube channel and his mentees. And it would have been if Doug was just normal, everyday superstar coach. Instead, the media seemed to fixate on Doug's disability. You see, despite being the NFL's expert guru of kicking, Doug himself has never actually ran a play. He's never kicked a football through the goalpost because Doug Blevins was born with cerebral palsy, and he lived his life coaching from an electric wheelchair. I'll repeat the last part because I know it's a bit of a shocker. Doug Blevins, the best kicking mentor in the league, has never played football. Everything he knows about kicking, he mastered from a wheelchair. Enough to be nominated for the NFL Hall of Fame. And to show for his mastery and mentorship, he has 50 YouTube subscribers. You're listening to The Re-Engineered You. This is a podcast about self-empowerment and all the myths, lies, and misconceptions we tell ourselves. Then we use science and history to bust those myths and re-engineer a better you. I'm your host, Todd and Joe, the extrovert.
And I'm the writer, researcher, and introvert, Joe Anthony, whose job it is to dig through the outer layer of no-duh on the internet and get to the facts.
Mentors like Doug Blevins aren't just underrated. Underrated is too light a word. Despite their literal game-changing contributions, mentors are hardly recognized at all. When athletes and actors and pop stars and CEOs take the stage to collect their trophy, mentors get their due like it's the credits of a movie. Just another name in a long list of people who made it possible. Or worse, the star collecting the trophy takes all the credit. They claim they did it alone, leaving out the people who made it possible. Just another false underdog narrative. But mentorship at any stage is absolutely vital to success. Just ask any of the kickers Doug Blevins boosted to NFL stardom. Funny thing though, the importance of mentorship is something we can prove statistically at any stage, from childhood to million-dollar entrepreneur. So that's what we're doing today. We're devoting a whole episode of The Re-Engineered You to mentors and mentorship. Why you should have a mentor, and why you should be a mentor, and where you can find one. And we're starting with 3 myths about mentorship. Myths like: Myth 1, Michael Jordan would still be Michael Jordan with or without coaches. The cream rises to the top, and anyone who is destined to be great will be great. Myth 2, adults and professionals don't need mentors. Once we're past our 20s, the days of needing an Obi-Wan are over. Myth 3, okay, so if we need adult mentors, it's going to be expensive, right? How else would we get a mentor in my corner if not cash or incredible talent? We're going to get into the stats and studies on the value of mentorship. But first, I want to tell Joe about the strangest mentor-mentee partnerships I could find online.
Would you say it's harder to mentor somebody in art or sports?
I think it's definitely art.
Why is that?
Because there's not some set rules on how to do everything. There's not the same structure there is with sports from a young age.
Okay.
It's been as many reps. What do you think?
I think that I think you're right. I think that most sports you can like rely on conventional wisdom. Like if you can't figure out how to mentor somebody, you just tell them run through tires.
Right. Well, you doing woodworking, that kind of stuff. I think that is comparably, right?
Right. There is a structure set up. Not that there isn't with art, but with art you can break structure and be sort of hailed as a hero for it. What are some mentorships in sort of like more artistic avenues that have looked fruitful from the outside?
Well, you bring up public speaking, and I have to improve my public speaking. I've taken quite a bit of acting classes. I've been in a few plays and some Shakespeare stuff. So there was a lot of good mentor-mentees relationships. Some of them are just bizarre. People you'd think would be totally opposites. But one of my favorite ones was, it's called the Alders family. And the woman is Stellar Adler. And she is a actress who became a mentor to a lot of, she formed her own acting school. And the best actors in the world sharpened their blades there. I'm not going to go through the whole list. Warren Beatty. There's all these different actors and actresses that went there. My two favorite were Robert De Niro and Marlon Brando.
Really? Those are huge names. How have I never heard of Stellar Adler?
Stellar Adler, she's a Jewish American, and her family, she was like third generation actress, and she was a big motion picture star. But their family were big power actors and actresses for 50 years. And she learned everything she learned from her parents and from her grandparents. And this is their method. They really use the actors as the individuals, their own imagination. And it was balanced with dramatic combination of imagination and memory.
Okay. So she had this method worked out that was tailored to the individual. That sounds like a good coach.
Taking what they're already good at and running with it, as opposed to just trying to break bad habits. Okay.
So it seems like a lot of good, just from the outside, from what we've heard of Doug and Stella, a lot of good coaching seems to be observation.
Genuine curiosity. Back to the Robert De Niro thing. I saw this a few years ago when he was working on some movies with the comedian actor Ben Stiller. Mm-hmm. De Niro, who has been a won every award actor for how many years? 50 years. He went to Ben Stiller and said, "Teach me some comedic acting. I want to learn from you."
Really?
And I'm just thinking that shows why he's at the level he's at. Even after all these years, he's made $1 billion. He's still willing to listen to a younger mentor.
Right. That is something that is going to come up a couple times during our episode. Age is not a limiter for mentorship. If you are in talent, like if you are trying to hone something, get it from anyone you can.
So it doesn't have to be that old, wise, 76-year-old philosophy with the white beard and the pipe.
Exactly. You do not have to be Luke Skywalker seeking an Obi-Wan. You can find it from anybody. You just find somebody who is more talented than you in that moment. So, do you mind if we talk about mentorship with you and I?
That's my favorite subject.
That's why we're doing a podcast right now, because we can't shut up. So we met because of basically mentorship. Is that true?
Absolutely. I sought you out. We were in the same club together, and I had tons of ideas, but they were just a mess. So I brought these piles, 2 armful of papers, and said, "Help me turn this shit into something."
We don't have to reveal ages here, but Todd is a bit older than I am.
A decade older.
But at our organization, we're used to seeing people mentor each other at all levels. I saw a 20-year-old kid who won an award, mentor literally a 80-year-old man who was just starting to get over his nervousness in speaking to the public. So you can have that sort of cross-pollination of ideas.
You don't need the big sister, big brother. It can be anybody.
Exactly.
I think it's important to point out too that when you go and seek a mentor out, usually they're going to be just really pleased that you even asked them. They're going to be flattered. They're going to want to help you. But with Joe and I, he had a lot on his plate with his writing contest and just his career and everything. So I kind of had to build some trustworthiness by just spending time with him.
That is a very fair way to put it. Yes.
Because they want to see what your commitment level is before they commit what? What's the most valuable thing we have, Joe?
Trustworthiness.
Time. Right?
Oh yeah, time.
We only have
too.
so much of it, and their time off is what? It's valuable. We got to rest.
Yes, and there's something else to be said about if you are going to be somebody's mentor, gauge. Always be willing to give to your mentee. Always be willing to instruct them wherever they may need it, like wherever they would benefit from tailored to them. But you also don't want to give them too much. Like, it's not just about time management in a sort of business sense where your time is worth money, which it very much is. But you also don't want somebody who is only good for 30 minutes a week, and then you give them 9 hours of study a week. That's not going to jive well.
Yeah, mutual respect means mutual time spent, mutual investment.
Perfect. That is a really good way of putting it.
Now, Joe has taken my speeches from my level, and everyone's at different levels. Not to be a disclaimer, but he took my speeches from the kindergarten level to college, and the reaction I get now is far better than the one I got before. And the most important thing I learned from working with Joe isn't really a speech thing. It's about a life thing, about taking criticism and feedback. And Joe taught me this, and I'm what people would refer to as overly emotional. He said no matter how poorly advice or feedback is delivered, there's probably a lot of truth in the words that you can learn from and that you can grow from.
And if nothing else, the most true thing somebody can tell you when they hear you speak or read something that you've written, they can say, I want to hear more or I want to hear less. And that is always truthful, unless they're flattering you. So, Todd, if you don't mind, usually when we do research, I will throw narratives around, like we'll look into documentaries we're interested in, or we'll talk about movies and things. The subjects of the stories really come from anywhere. How did you find the Doug Blevins story?
Huge NFL fan. That's probably my favorite sport. And I came across this. I think it was a Washington Post article. And I was reading this, and it's like what you said in the narrative. It's like, this can't be true. So a man who's never kicked a football, I expected the best NFL kicking coach of all time to be what? This Argentina soccer player,
right?
Who with this cannon, these huge thighs, who could kick the ball 100 yards. No, it's a guy with cerebral palsy who's never played a sport in his life.
I'm not saying this doesn't exist. That's like somebody who has never spoken or written coming and teaching us how to write and speak better. It's so wild.
And it's one thing just to be a teacher, to be a coach in high school. This guy coached players in the NFL. And what that gave me a new respect for is for coaching and curiosity.
I like that. So today we're going to get into why coaching is so important, why mentorship is so important, and why we need to start early. Like Doug Blevins, all of the people on his channel are young. Like you would think that such a superstar coach would only focus on professional NFL players, which he did. He coached for who, the Dolphins?
6 years.
So you would think that Doug Blevins, with all of his skill, would only coach like real pros who are looking to get that last, 1%, that last, extra few yards into their kick. But most of his videos are youngsters who he's helping.
Yeah, high school kids and younger.
Yeah, college kids too. But yeah, certainly not NFL greats. So he basically mentors everybody from what I can see.
Yeah, and they're not prodigies either. They're not, these guys are Tiger Woods and going to be the next. They're just guys who want to kick.
Right. When we started working on this episode, it reminded me of I was sitting through a presentation once, and it was about local crime and basically broken windows theory. And they just very briefly mentioned that if there is like a troubled family, troubled kid, it only takes one mentor or one stable family member to set up a pattern of stability in that kid's life.
Really? With like 9 toxic relationships around?
Right. They can be completely surrounded by chaos if they have one really good example that is consistent and keeps communicating with them. And that seems to be the key, is continued communication. You can't just mentor them for a summer and then, cut them loose.
The first thing that popped in my head was the Boys and Girls Club.
I'm glad you say that, because we are going to... That's exactly what we're talking about. Do you want to get into a little bit of the statistics about what mentorship looks like in youth?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is where we want to sort of like build our case for mentorship. If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably wondering, why do I need to think about teen mentorship? I'm here to learn how to become a better entrepreneur. We want to give you a whole picture. We want to show that mentorship should be something that is started early and that it continues throughout your life. So to start with, these are stats that basically come directly from, like Todd was saying, like the Boys and Girls Club, YMCA, things like that. This is from mentoring.org, and they regurgitate statistics that are actually pretty well known in Big Brothers Big Sisters, Boys and Girls Club, everything like that. I won't quote the individual studies these came from. You can actually just look at their article. They link off to all of them. The first one we want to talk about is 2 early warning indicators that students may be falling off track. Is absenteeism and skipping, as in like skipping class. Which kind of seem the same thing to me, but they kind of differentiate it in this. Apparently, if you have a mentor, so just somebody from the outside who is older than you and has taken you aside and regularly talks about the value of, continuing your education, they're about 52% less likely to skip class, and they are less likely to repeat classes, meaning they don't repeat grades as often.
So big brother and big sister, you don't want to disappoint them by not being present in class, because you know it's going to bother them. If nobody cares, why do you care?
Right. Exactly. I think that's a big part of it, is somebody else cares, because if it's just you, you can basically justify it. But if you have to come meet with somebody on the weekend who's going to be like, hey, did you miss any classes? Having somebody care about what you're doing day to day, it really means a lot. And that's, I'm not going to say it's the biggest part of mentorship, but if you want to know who's a good mentor, like think back in your life about mentors and teachers. They cared. That was the first indicator to you that you needed to step your game up, is they seemed to care as much as you did.
Yeah, they were genuinely interested in you.
Yeah. Mentorship also lowered reoccurring behavioral problems. And this is a big one for us. We've talked about opportunity gaps, especially socioeconomic. We also talk about education gaps. According to the study, young adults who face an opportunity gap are 55% more likely to be enrolled in college than those that did not have a mentor. So if nothing else in this study speaks to you, that one should.
That's a shockingly high percentage.
Yeah, that is massive. That's you have a mentor, and you exceed a coin flip in whether or not you will attend college, even being an underdog. Um,
Well, we've seen that trend in high school. The kids who start showing up late, then they start missing days, weeks, and the next thing you know, they drop out. And a lot of them they're not behind, they're not slow. It's literally just an attendance problem.
oh yeah, I've seen lots of intelligent people who should not have failed a class, who just can't be asked to care anymore. And if somebody was there to ask them, they might. This one I am not going to comment on too much. But this one is youths who regularly meet with mentors are 46% likely than peers to start using illegal drugs, 27% less likely to start drinking. This study seems to come sort of from the DARE age back in the 90s. Still valid, though. That still carries weight. I was going to ask about your mom does tutoring, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think tutoring sits in sort of mentorship? What kind of role do you think that plays?
It's absolutely humongous. And first of all, for the accountability, they'll come over to my mom's house, all different ages, and what do kids say? I don't have any homework. I did it all or whatever. My mom will dig through their backpack. And as much as there's a little bit of scolding, there's an authority there, but it's not all authority. If they can't get the homework done, she puts her pen down and drives through it. And then the kids, what happens is when they get behind, they get they're over it. They're like, we can't get caught up. I'm overwhelmed. It's never going to happen. But she takes them and puts them on a path, gives them some structure to catch up slowly. We're not going to do it all today. And I've seen her, Joe, take kids who can't read, who are getting D's and F's, and get them to the honor roll in a very short amount of time, just with that little bit of mentorship.
That is fantastic. Kids that have gotten back on track, do they keep going back to your mother? Like, do they eventually drop out of being tutored?
That is the goal, is that they don't need it anymore.
Okay. That is a good way of putting it. So I went and I started reading about tutoring too, because I really wanted a well-rounded look at mentorship at young ages. I read a Turkish study. It was about Turkish high-stakes math tests, and this came from the University of Kansas. And I also read about a Polish study on tutoring for what's called a gymnasium test. That's where they pack everybody into a gym and they sit you down at desks and they say, complete this math test in X amount of hours, or
Turks.
Yeah. And both of these studies, completely separate from different parts of the world, they wanted to look at tutoring and how it is used in school, how well it bridges the socioeconomic gap. So basically, does the job your mother do, does that bridge that socioeconomic gap? Is it enough to take, say, underprivileged kids and get them into college, or to get them to start passing classes like their wealthier peers who ostensibly have people coaching them their whole life? Now, this is something that we've discussed from Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers. And we also discussed it a little bit in our class episode with Anna Delvey. Basically, finding the best tutors and finding the best sort of like resources for your kids early, that's something that we referred to as opportunity hoarding, which is if you just skim, say, I was going to say the Yellow Pages. That doesn't exist anymore. If you just skim Google for the best tutor, you might end up with the kid down the street who got A's in calculus, and then he'll come over and he'll try to teach your kid. If you have an in, or if you're in the know, or if you're in a high socioeconomic class, you'll be hiring an ex-professor to teach your kid that calculus. So not only does socioeconomic class kind of play into who ends up tutoring your kids, who ends up being your kid's mentor, across the board, it seemed like both these studies pointed that it's used, it's used as a Band-Aid. So when you said that your mother does it until the kid is hopefully doesn't need it anymore, they're caught up in school, they don't need assistance as much, that's the way tutoring is used everywhere. Basically, it's grade based, not need in the personality based. So in short, we want to point out that tutors, as much as we can find, bridge the opportunity gap. It makes it to where kids are more likely to pass tests and achieve and get into the next class, like get into the next grade. However, it is not a replacement for mentorship. It serves the same role, and like Todd's mother, it does the same thing in a personal level. It shows somebody else cares, and somebody will hold you accountable to yourself. But people only use tutors for as long as they need it. So it's better to seek out a mentor who will stick with you and who you can call on.
Like a spiritual advisor that you're going to need all of your life. So this isn't something, Joe, we're just going to try. This isn't just going to get me past through algebra. This is something I'm going to do for the rest of my life.
Exactly.
Even if it's not with this person, I'm going to seek someone out.
Now, on rare occasion, paid tutors can do that. I'm sure that if, one of these students called up Todd's mother, she would probably reach out a helping hand because she is very nice like that. But most tutors, they're being paid hourly, so they are a Band-Aid for grades. They are not necessarily a life mentor. So just super quick before we get back to Doug Blevins and how he mentored kicking. Do you know where the word mentor comes from?
Yeah, where did it start?
Okay, did you ever read the Odyssey?
No.
Okay. Greek myth, required in school. What kind of mentor or tutor is your mother?
She's all subjects.
Okay.
But mostly reading, dyslexic.
Okay. She might be teaching the Odyssey to some of her students. Odysseus, who is on his way home from war and from being harassed by all these magical creatures along his path, like he's angered the gods, and on his way back, his wife Penelope is he's been declared dead. And Penelope is being harassed by these suitors. There's just a gaggle of guys who want to marry her, mostly for Odysseus's fortune, because she's just sitting in a house alone, like a very fancy Greek house.
Rich girl, yeah.
And an older character in disguise shows up, and this character's name is Mentor. And Mentor takes Odysseus' son aside, Telemachus, and is like, hey, you may want to stall your mother, and you may want to stall these suitors. And so this hidden character, Mentor, who, shows up as an older person, it's actually a goddess in disguise. It's Athena. And Athena has Odysseus' back. So she is doing him a solid by taking Telemachus aside and telling him this. So the word mentor actually comes from the Odyssey, and it comes from just a named character.
So there's in the future, dude named Mentor from the olden days.
Yeah, in the future we may be using Obi-Wan. Hey, I'm going to be your Obi-Wan today, or yeah, the Boys and Girls Club needs more Obi-Wans to volunteer. So let's, can we get into our kicking Obi-Wan, Doug Blevins?
Yeah, our hero, Doug Blevins. To get into his story, I have to go back. When he was a boy, he was into everything football. Now, he couldn't play football, so he did whatever he could to get close to the game. He used to keep statistics for the Pop Warner League, so he just would volunteer. He also became a film evaluator for the local high school. Now, at a very young age, about 14 years old, he noticed that high school kickers just weren't very good. They very rarely made kicks. So it's kind of a hindrance to winning. So being the curious kid that he is, he didn't reach out to his high school coach. He wrote to the Dallas Cowboys kicking coach. The Dallas Cowboys.
The audacity. That's interesting.
When you're 14, you don't know any better, right? He's like, hey.
Right.
The coach sent him back some materials, which is very cool. How cool is that?
That's awesome. I always love it when a star or like somebody who's a big pro they are willing to like answer the fan mail of kids.
Don't you always envision them too with like a big bag of mail? And like, oh God, here's Tuesdays, you know?
Right.
Back in the old days, you had to open them up and actually read them.
It's a fancy letter opener. That's what I'm imagining.
So this Cowboys coach sent him some stuff, some material, and then he went and he persuaded the local high school coach to let him try to improve. Say, you know, you're not getting any points now. Let me try to help.
Oh, so he was literally doing this coaching in his high school.
Everywhere local, he's just into all things football. When he's in his room at home, when he's on the bus to school, he's just totally into football.
Okay.
And he started noticing at a young age that he started seeing things that even people who had been coaching and playing football their whole life hadn't seen. He saw some like micro subtle changes. So he had an eye for it at a very young age. Probably because he was so curious in it.
Curious and observant. So that's signs of a good mentor very early.
Now, what's very different to me, I played athletics all growing up. I was not good or great at any of them, but I played everything. And now what really impresses me about this and what he said is it isn't his disability that's a problem. He said his disability has actually helped him. Because most coaches, what do when they kick a football? They put a football down, they run and kick it and say, do it like this.
Right.
He had to become a world-class communicator to teach people just with his words and not using his body. And to teach people of all ages and all skill levels, that takes a long time. You need your 10,000, 20,000 Gladwell hours for that, Joe.
Right. And that is something that, have you ever watched sports commentary and you can tell somebody doesn't know how to communicate the ideas of what they can physically do?
Well, that's a lot of thing with sports. The people who are really, really good at them really can't teach.
Yeah.
You know, you say, oh, those who can't teach coach, but it's not true. The people who are great can't coach.
So he's basically started his career as a super fan.
He did, and he moved up the levels slowly. It took years, and he kept his passion for it. One thing, too, and we're going to have in the links, I want you to check out his videos. The way he talks to his kids, the way he encourages them, Joe, is very, very inspiring. He's so patient, and he's so loving with each kid, no matter if they're little kids or in the NFL.
That's awesome. So those videos we're talking about that have like a couple hundred views, you might get some real wisdom out of that.
It's definitely worth your time. Now, we talk a lot about how important it is. What's an expert, Joe? An expert is someone who knows a lot about little, right?
Right.
But his niche is paper thin. Keep in mind, there's only 32 of these job openings in the world.
Okay.
And every high school, college has all these kids that are kicking all the time. And lots of kids play soccer. A lot of kids play football. And it's $1 million job. So he's coached David Akers, who's a 6-time Pro Bowler, Orlando Mari, and Justin Tucker, just to name a few. But I'm going to save the one kicker that's going to shock everybody for the next section.
Okay, I like that. Yeah, niche. That's something that popped out to me over and over with mentors, is the higher level the mentor. We started this episode by teasing about CEOs, pop stars, movie stars, actors. The mentors they're seeking out are extraordinarily good at one very specific thing. Like Todd and I talked about our mentorship, I'm very, very specific in that I look at a story arc in a very particular way. So if you are a mentor, if you're wondering, should I be a mentor? Just ask yourself, what is the most niche, most specific thing you are good at and something that you would know how to pass on? And also ask yourself the question, should you pass it on? Like, is this information that you want to share at a business level? And that's an important question to ask. Todd, when you decided to look for public speaking mentors, did you think you needed a mentor, or did you just hear other people speak and say, I want that?
I really thought that I didn't. I thought that I knew better and that I had done more sales training and I'd watched more speeches. I'd read more books about it. It wasn't until I heard Joe speak and saw how people reacted. I said, I wanted some of that. And it took a few reps. I didn't notice it because it was such a different style than mine.
Yeah. That's a very good way of putting it. In writing, I've done the same, where I'll think I'm very, very good, and then I'll see somebody who is good at a very, very small specific thing, like not writing in general, but this person is better at like a type of dialogue, reaction dialogue. Literally, I'll seek somebody out and ask them, how'd you learn that?
In my curiosity for public speaking, I tried to see what really, really got the millions of views and what really got people emotionally invested, that they would go to somebody else and say, you got to watch this person speak. And what I noticed, they all had one thing in common, Joe, a great narrative.
Yeah.
With no exceptions. So I went and found a group that was all storytellers. There were people that were supposed to be, that were practicing story arc. We did all these things. And I got the mentor who was the best writer in the group, which is our hero here, Joe Anthony.
I will accept your flattery, but
that's a facts.
I have since abused Todd of his goodwill and mentorship for everything else in life. I've got the story thing down mostly. Still working on it, but I come to Todd for other life advice. So Todd has become a mentor for a lot of other areas.
Win-win, we call that.
Yeah. I fall into a category. There's a Forbes article that I got into during this. I fall into the category of 76% of people who think mentors are important, but don't have one.
Oh boy, that's like writing your goals down but not doing it.
That is exactly the same thing. I feel ashamed to say it, but this comes from Forbes. This was a Christine Comaford article. 76% of people think mentors are important. Like, they don't even know the statistics. They just think they're important. But only about 37% of people have one that they can name, or that they have one in general.
Do you think it's fear, or do you think it's they're insecure about asking, or do they think they don't want to invest more time, they don't want to take more on their plate, they don't want someone holding them accountable?
I think it might be putting more on your plate. That's a tough thing to get over because everyone's got a busy day. But being held accountable is hurtful to the ego. I mean, like when we talked about like criticism, like, mentoring somebody on, criticism can be good for you, or whenever you get to the hard stuff, it bruises the ego, at least temporarily. And
just for the record, we're allowed to be kind of on a high horse here because Joe and I both have mentors and mentees for life. We've bought into this. We know it works. We would suggest it to anybody. They will bring out the best in you.
Yeah.
By exposing sometimes the worst in you.
We're not just talking about the podcast either. We have mentors for other niche things we're into as well. Like, we're both very much I will climb the mountaintop and do somebody's laundry if they tell me how to do something better. Most people, statistically, we're sitting in the room, talking to each other. Apparently, most people opt for same-sex mentors. Why do you think that is?
Maybe just relatability, communication style. What do you think it is?
I think it's that. I think it's just that. Well, also in business, it's. I'm not saying a man won't reach down to help a woman, but we hear a lot about like women have trouble breaking the glass ceiling in pay, and so a lot of times it takes a female mentor to reach down. Not that we can really speak on that. We're two guys in the room here. But I do notice that from where we're from, public speaking, I usually see same-sex mentorship too. And the statistics hold out on this, by the way. They bear this out. Only 14% of mentor relationships started by asking someone to be their mentor. So what Todd did is by far and away statistically less likely what will happen. 61% of this, compared to the Forbes article, and this comes from a college study from Nazarene University, 61% of mentorships just develop naturally.
Yeah. Well, we're from a club and a support group that encourages it. we tell each other, go get a mentor, ask somebody. But in real life, it's not really like that.
Right. In real life, it's more like you find a friend who knows a whole lot, and then you just keep going to them for advice. And then at some point you realize you're in a mentorship. That is what that looks like naturally. And the last statistics I want to shove into our face, 71% of Fortune 500 companies have mentor programs.
Wow, so it's its own. So that's proof that it works.
Right. The two things that Fortune 500 companies seem to have a lot of, mentorship programs and public speaking programs. So communication and mentorship, those seem to be really the big separators of, who's big and who is going hungry.
Well, we dig into researching. We found that one of the greatest world conquerors of all times, Alexander the Great, he had a mentor. Guess who it was? Guess what bloodthirsty guy would be good enough to mentor him?
Another military general, somebody equally bloodthirsty.
It was the soft-spoken foreign philosopher Aristotle.
Okay. So
that's crazy, right?
Yeah. I mean, Alexander the Great, it's just conquer. Why would he have a philosopher as a mentor?
Well, I'll explain it to you. His dad, Philip, he'd urged his son to work hard, and he didn't want his son making the exact same mistakes that he had made in running his dynasty. And Alexander really had a lot of problems with his values and stuff, not with his values, but how his dad had lived his life. He didn't want to, and a lot of us do that. We grow up and I look at our parents and like, I don't want to be anything like that, right, Joe?
Right.
And he was very embarrassed by all of the children that his dad had with other women other than his mother.
Okay. And Philip was just a hard drinking barbarian, basically.
And so Alexander the Great being in more to values and morals, and he also really loved Greek poetry. So his dad assigned Aristotle. He thought with his natural intuition, a lot of his philosophy that he shared, even though he was a soft-spoken, was very similar to Philip's. So he thought, this is a good soft way for me to not just push my ideas on my son, but to have him put in through a third party from a non-authority figure, put it that way.
Actually, we haven't discussed that yet, but that actually is kind of a neat move. Like if you are a parent and you want to give your kids values, get them a mentor. Get them a mentor that will reflect some of those, but in an indirect way.
A totally different relationship. It's not so overbearing. And so what an honor for Aristotle. Right. Everybody knew that this was going to be the new free leader of the free world, right? And what a very serious responsibility to mold them.
The application process for that must have been hilarious. like Aristotle sitting next to two other tutors or philosophers or something. That would have been, I want to be there for that interview.
Cool as a cucumber, right?
Right, exactly.
But I want to go back to our hero, Doug Blevins, and what his career looked like. I talked about earlier, do you know who he coached?
Who's that?
The best kicker of all time, the Hall of Fame kicker who won 2 Super Bowls off of his foot with the last kick of the game, Adam Vinatieri.
No shit.
All told, he won 4 Super Bowls, and that was the real reason I looked this up. I am a huge New England Patriots fan. He won 2 Super Bowls off his foot. The clock ticking down. You make it, you win. You miss it, you lose. And he made them both.
Dang.
And he was coached by Doug Blevins, a man with cerebral palsy who had never kicked a football.
So the Aristotle of football kicking, which may be giving him too much credit, who has 50 YouTube subscribers, taught him.
And Adam's nicknames are Automatic Adam and Iceman, for not only having a powerful leg, but when the pressure's at the highest, where most kickers miss it, that's when we make our biggest mistakes, is when the most pressure's on us. And I have a feeling that he got a lot of those skills from our hero here, Doug.
Wow. So I mean, like we've talked about Doug so much today. Did he get the NFL Hall of Fame? Like, is his chair somewhere in a giant, Hall of Records?
He didn't get in, but it's very, very difficult. First of all, he's not a player. So there's only very few spots for people who are media people, owners of teams. Non-players is a very small sliver.
Okay.
But just to be nominated, this is just my own stats. To be nominated for the NFL Hall of Fame is less than 1% of people that play football at a very high level their whole life.
So just nominating him, that might have actually just been a tip of the cap, a nod.
Now, he's such a humble guy. And I think at some point when you're the expert, the best in the world, you coached the Miami Dolphins for 6 years. It's okay to be a little arrogant, right? A little stuck up.
Sure.
But he wasn't. He was shocked and honored by his nomination. He just didn't think he deserved it. And to be on that list with all these people that he's looked up to, and a sport that he's loved with all of his heart, football has always been his first love.
If you have that niche of a skill and you're nominated for the Hall of Fame, that's when you start using those 6 little words. Do you know who I am?
Well, all said and done, he was the proud tutor of 26 current or former NFL kickers and punters. A great life body of work for anybody.
That's incredible. Okay, so in football, I have some idea of this, that if you are looking for a mentor or a coach, people will connect to you. Like there are schools that will, like coaches that will reach out to other coaches. There are people who will network you. How do you find a mentor in real life? Like what is your approach when you go for a mentor?
I think the thing is getting out of your comfort zone. I look at it a lot like asking someone out on a date, but I first think you have to go and, first of all, the ones I do are weight training and public speaking, but yours are more online, right? Your writing clubs and stuff?
Almost exclusively at this point.
How does that work?
Oh boy. You first, I hate to say it, but with writing, there's something called gatekeeping, meaning there are so many people who are trying to do it. Since everyone is literate and everybody's online, there is a ocean of people who aren't that serious. And to show that you're serious, you enter into competitions. You're not entering into writing competitions because you think you're going to win. You're doing it to keep in good practice. And because once in a while when you get an honorable mention or a certificate or something, it shows that you are actually on the right track. So for people who have listened to this podcast before and they hear us talking about me writing, that is actually really the biggest part of it, is keeping good practice and using that as a way to network with good mentors.
So then they see you, they see your work, they start to recognize your name, and they say,
yes,
hey, this kid's pretty good. So they reach out to you, or do you reach out to them and compliment them on something they've accomplished, an award they've won, or a style? Or
I compliment them. I know they have written something. I've seen something they've written, or I've seen them posting, and I see that they have more experience in a niche than I do. They're better at like a type of, maybe they're a poet, and their paragraphs look very lyrical to me, or they're good at a type of dialogue, and I will approach them, and I do what I do what it's called the friendly stalker approach. We're going to reference a Forbes article throughout this. But I will approach them, and I'll be like, hey, I saw you here. I've read your thing here. You did amazing in this article. Show me your ways, please. And like Todd said earlier, people are flattered. Even if they don't have time for you, if somebody turns you away, they will still feel like you have given them a compliment, which is exactly what you're going for. And you can even include that. You can say, I know you may not have time for this, and that's perfectly fine. Take this as a compliment if you don't, but you're amazing at this thing.
A compliment is better than a gift.
Exactly. Yeah, it totally is.
In boxing, what we would do is A lot of the trainers are more experienced and work with the higher level boxers. What you do is they see you at the gym all the time. They don't even notice you. They see you sparring, see you do something stupid, and their heart kind of opens up. Say, hey, kid, come on over. Let me show you something.
Right.
And then you got them.
They take a little pity on you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to reference a Forbes article. We already have been, that is called "Finding a Mentor is Easier Than You Think." The woman in here, I want to share her story. So the writer here, Lisa Quast, she, for when I was researching, her friendly stalker approach beat everybody's. She talks about how she got advice and time from Steve Jobs. So if I told you, like when he was still around, if I had said, bring me a short interview with Steve Jobs, how would you start that process?
Let me tell you, that's like the one guy I wouldn't feel comfortable asking. He just slapped me, I think, right? If I'm lucky, he'll slap me. Yeah,
like it's hard to approach mentors who are friendly. One that would just like hate you for even asking. That's hard. She talks about how in her article, she sent him, she FedExed him letters and messages, like lots of them, like more than a dozen. And eventually he paid enough attention and he told her, he's like very coldly called her up and he's like, how do I make this stop? He literally said something like, how do I make this end? And then he's like, you have 5 minutes, bring a timer.
Oh, wow. It's like, marry me, then this will stop. I'm relentless.
Right. Yeah, this will end eventually. The other two approaches that I want to point out, and these usually work for mentorships too. There's the old friend of a friend. If you want to get mentored by somebody and you have an in, you just have them introduce you. We're not going to cover that much because, I mean, that kind of speaks for itself. You don't really need to. And then there's what she calls the I care about what you care about approach, which means if you find somebody who is advocating the same cause, championing the same thing that you are, it's much easier to get somebody to mentor you because you're fighting for the same thing.
You can't help but like someone like something you like.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. The same series of Forbes articles about mentorship, they point out what Todd pointed out as far as finding a mentor. And I'm just going to use Todd as an example. Todd talked about when he showed up, he knew what he wanted. He was looking for a very specific skill. They say in this article, clarify what you want. You can't just say, I want to be better at this nebulous thing in life. I want to be better at finances. You have to say, I want to be better at building home insulation to save me money in the long run. Or I want to be better at, this type of writing or this type of public speaking.
Get very granular about your goals.
Yes, get granular. Think outside your cubicle or home. Don't restrict yourself. You really actually do have to... If it was somebody who was already around you, you would have been mentored by them already. Or you would have talked to them and asked for their advice.
So they're not going to come knock on your door then, is what you're telling me.
No, or you would have already been mentored by them. If it was as easy as asking Grandpa for some sage wisdom, you would have already done it.
My point is you got to get a little uncomfortable.
You have to get uncomfortable. Set up a meeting and be clear with your mentor. These two are super important. Talk about time limits. Like Steve Jobs up there, you don't have to say 5 minutes, bring a timer, but you can be clear and say, hey, look, I just want lunch with you. Here's how much time I would like of yours. Please, consider it. Be clear about your intention.
The Steve Jobs thing is extreme, the 5-minute timer. But what I've found with working with mentees that I have now and mentors, which I've had for a good part of my life, 45 minutes is a good amount of time.
That is sage advice. I think that's perfect.
5 hours and that, it's just a lot of just fatigue.
Right. We started this whole episode not poking fun at Doug Blevins and his YouTube channel. We actually were more trying to point out how little credit this has led to him getting. but how many things he has tried in life. Can we catch up with Doug? Like now that we know that he did not quite get his, he did not win the Hall of Fame. Where did he end up at? Where did he go with it?
What's shocking about the video thing to me is, with the people, the success rate that they've had, you would think there would be at least one kid that would have watched those videos 8,000 times.
Right. Guardian and Washington Post, like with that kind of attention.
It's a free resource. So they think that their high school coach in Wyoming or New York or anything knows more than Doug Blevins. They're fooling themselves.
Right.
So that's like a free resource that's not being used. But Doug tried his hand at to make some success financially in other ways. My favorite one was he signed up for a motivational speaker.
Awesome.
That's what I think. I'm thinking, and I watched some of his stuff. He's powerful. He's inspirational. He's got a great story. He's got NFL fame. But people didn't do it. People just weren't into it.
Okay.
He also became a stand-up comic.
Were all of his jokes about kicking footballs?
No. He was cool. He went out there. He was very confident. He rolls out in his wheelchair, gregarious. For being a coach all this years, he knows how to talk. He knows how to public speak, and that's what stand-up comedy is. There was no nervousness. I'll tell you one of the jokes he said. He makes fun of himself sometimes, about being disabled. He says, I think everyone's disabled. He says, if you don't believe me, just go to a Walmart parking lot. And he's also being heckled by people in the crowd, and he was giving it right back to them. He was putting them right in their place.
Wait, who would heckle Doug Blevins?
That's what I thought, but he just laughed at it. He just made fun of them. And
Now, I happened to look at his Doug's LinkedIn, which had like 2 recommendations, and unfortunately I did not click on his stand-up comedy. I saw it only had 2 thumbs up, and was like, this can't be good. So I think like everybody else, what is his real legacy? If it's not public speaking, stand-up comedy, and touring, what is he leaving?
To me, his legacy is to be 6 years in the NFL with all the coaching changes, the very competitive ultra merry-go-round that is the NFL. To survive in that environment for 6 years as a kicking coach is awesome.
That's great. I like that.
But more of the man, the way he talked about his handicap, he has no self-pity. He even says, my handicap is a good one to have. He said, I have a slight case of cerebral palsy. I don't have convulsions. I'm not spastic. And mine isn't progressive. I have no speech impediment, and I have no mental impairment. So he's thankful even for his disability that it hasn't gotten more aggressive and taken more of his freedoms. How many people would say that?
That is a great way to look at it.
He never uses disability as an excuse, like I would. If I had cerebral palsy, I wouldn't be doing anything. This is a story to me about knowing who you truly are and not listening to others. How many people do you think teased him and told him he's wasting his time trying to be a football coach, Joe?
I'm guessing everyone who attended his high school and listened to his advice on the field who didn't kick.
Right. He took that all those years, and now he's not saying, I told them all. I did it by myself. He doesn't say that. He knows how important mentor-mentee relationships. He's the best field goal kicking coach that ever lived. That's his legacy. There's a part of this story where he's sitting at home in his office where his trophy case is. And this blew me away. He has footballs up there from the Super Bowl that his kickers kicked. But also in that trophy case right next to him are high school footballs of his students that they kicked that weren't championship games. That shows what kind of man he was.
That's awesome.
Mentors make historic differences in people's lives. From Alexander the Great being mentored by Aristotle, to Tim Grover helping Michael Jordan elevate his game through 6 NBA championships. We're never too old to benefit from a mentor. And mentorship, at a young age, can keep us in school, guide us to academic success, and close the achievement gap, especially in math. Then why are school tutors and mentors only used as a Band-Aid for underperforming students? Why is it that 76% of professionals think mentors are important for everyone, yet only 37% have mentors? This may be a case of greatness worshiping. We may assume that achievers will naturally rise to the top, with or without help, or that mentors will seek us out when we've gotten big enough to stand out. But that's not always the case. Some mentors, like Doug Blevins, are out there waiting for us. They're underappreciated, underfollowed, and they don't toot their own horn nearly as much as they should. It's up to us to seek out the best mentors in our field, pay them a little respect, and listen to what they have to say. Or even better, if you have a specialty, niche talent, and you can impart on an uppercomer, go seek them out, sit them down, and give them a little of that mentor treatment. You never know. Your mentee might be the next Alexander the Great. You've been listening to The Re-Engineered You. Thank you so much for listening to the show. You mean the world to us. We have a new episode every week.
You can connect with us at www.re-engineeredyou.com. That's where we have research links, show notes, and articles for each of our episodes. We also appreciate feedback, and we love spirited debates.
We're not experts in anything, but we've got an opinion on everything.